All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today. It is Thursday, the 12th day of the 12th month of the 24th year of the 21st millennium, right? Or the third millennium, 21st century, I guess, of the Common Era, if we want to go all the way there. So we'll start with Krugman, and we'll start in Gaza, but we'll talk about this latest aggressive failure. We'll get right to it. That would be Paul Krugman and his retirement, or quitting. I'd say quitting. I don't know. He's not really. Is he quitting? I don't know. He's retiring from the New York Times. But he says he's going to keep writing. Obviously, he will. He's got a huge audience. Why wouldn't he? And he'll try to influence affairs. And I got to tell you, what a disappointment for me. Just like President Obama, I had a lot of, when Krugman first came to the fore 25 years ago, he said, wow, a long time ago, I read his columns. I said, wow, this guy's really kind of telling it like it is. And he seems to get it, and the influence the billionaires and stuff. He's really against it. And, I was thrilled. It was great. It was awesome. And he would go on some of those Sunday talk shows a lot. And all of it, this is good stuff. Good job, Krugman. But, after a while, the bloom really fell off that rose, and he became clearly an establishment, a Democratic establishment hack. Arguing in favor of Obamacare, saying, well, it would be better, I guess, if we started from scratch, which is exactly what Obama said. But since we can't, the insurance companies aren't going to let us, we'll have to go with this kludge, and it'll still make things better. And a lot of stuff like that. He was for Hillary. He was against Bernie. I mean, just the record became worse and worse over time. We'll go over his final column. This is an academic. This is a Nobel Prize winner. So one of the brightest, in a tough discipline, I think economics. Wow, very impressive. You got to know math, right? It's not a soft science. It's kind of in the middle, right? It's not chemistry. It's not physics, which are considered hard sciences, and that you really have to be super smart. But sociology, I don't know. It's kind of pop, right? Maybe what you're saying sociology is persuasive. It reflects real intellectual, depth and scholarship. Maybe it's just a load of crap. I think economics, can be sort of in the middle. You have a lot of BS coming out of economists, but on the other hand, you have to have numbers and careful study and understand mathematics. So there's more variety, I think, in terms of the quality of economic scholarship than there is perhaps in the hard sciences. But that said, no, Krugman's clearly very, very bright, and he understands this stuff much more so than I do. But in the end, he became a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, a partisan hack, and it really, really, really hurts. It does. I want to believe, I want to believe there are people who represent, who speak for powerful institutions with real influence, like the New York Times, frankly, like Princeton University, where he's a Nobel Prize winning professor. You'd want to believe, I certainly want to believe, and I know people maybe from less privileged backgrounds would be like, no, those guys are phonies. There's nothing to them. They're hollow. They're empty. And I don't quite subscribe to that. I do believe if you become, you reach a certain level of eminence in a field like economics, that you are, in fact, qualified, you're competent, you got there by dint of hard work and intellectual scholarship. And I think that's true for Krugman, but I also think that either it went to his head, or he confused access with influence, or he, just simply by virtue of his exalted, privileged position, simply could not understand how terrible things have become under both Democrats and Republicans, how the Republicans are largely responsible for the fate of the American public and the world. And he couldn't go there. He couldn't accept that. Perhaps because he was in part responsible for it. By the way, nice comment here. Love your work, requesting your opinion, feedback. All right, we'll get to it. That's a nice comment, though. Appreciate it. I'll try to get some feedback back to the commenter there. Oh, am I? Let's see if we're live. I should be, but yes, we are. You know, I got worried about that because we had that problem earlier. Was it earlier this week where I was live, but I wasn't through the thumbnail that I had posted? But that's okay now. That's fine. All right, let's get to first the always awful news, always tragic situation for which we are, and our democratic leadership is responsible. The genocide in Gaza that we and Israel are responsible for. So I told you there was some question about the number of deaths, where we were. Was it over 44,700, 44,800? So according to Barron's here with a link, it's really, they're just channeling AFP, which is Agence France Presse, the French media outlet. They have 44,835 with another 30 deaths at the hands of the bloody, murderous Israeli military over the past 24 hours. So there's really no way you can describe this except it's an atrocity of our time. It's a Holocaust of our time. And those terms, you know, people I don't say people, I use the term Holocaust to describe what Israel is doing to Gaza, and I think it's wholly appropriate. I defend it. I think it's comparable in many ways, not yet, hopefully never, in terms of the number of deaths, but simply in terms of what we're seeing, where a isolated, concentrated group of people basically within a very confined region as a result of their ethnicity are being targeted and murdered and killed, right? And said we had 75% women and children. We know Israel's shooting children in the head and chest. We know they're using children as shields, as human shields, when they go into buildings that may or may not be mined. We know that they're torturing and raping people. So that's a Holocaust. It's a fire. It's a fire that's consuming the people of Gaza that Israel and the United States have lit. And I also use the term climate holocaust to describe what the U.S., well, the world, the oil companies, the fossil fuel industry is doing to our planet. It is indeed burning it up. And we've even seen, I mean, we're literally setting our planet on fire. So you know, people could say, well, you're hyperbolic, you're over the top, you exaggerate. I defend what I say. I give you the reasons for it. If you think I'm wrong or I'm over, it's not, you know, you could say you're being counterproductive, that you're scaring people off, that they're not going to listen to you. That may be true. And I think we need to be very mindful of our messages. But I also make the point that messaging, first and foremost, must be true, must be accurate, must be defensible. If it is true, if it is accurate, if it is defensible, then I don't think arguments like you're being a little too pessimistic are helpful. I think when you run into, arguments or claims like, well, Trump's a fascist, and I think that's defensible. If someone wants to make that argument, I'm not going to say that's false. What I'm going to say is it doesn't really capture the whole story. You're using the truth, which is that Trump is fascist or proto-fascist or neo-fascist, to promote an agenda that is not going to lead us to a better outcome. You're not, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Kamala supporter, and you claim if you're our revolution and you start going, well, we have to defeat the fascist Trump, which means embracing Democrats, then you're not being genuine. You're not being honest, because the people that you're supporting, that you're claiming we need to back, are also fascistic. So that's not an honest argument. But I don't see what's dishonest about calling Israel a genocidal state. or that what Israel is doing is genocide, or that our continued and increasing consumption and extraction of fossil fuels is creating a climate holocaust. Now, one way that could be disingenuous if I was saying that Israel is the genocidal state, but at the same exact time, Palestine was genocidal, which is what people sometimes argue. Oh, look at the Hamas. Look at the Hamas charter. They want to wipe Israel off the map. And I know many people have said that's not what the Hamas charter says. You are misrepresenting. You are misstating. You are lying about what Hamas is saying. I don't know. I don't speak Arabic. I'm not going to go back and look at competing arguments over exactly what some phrase or other in the Hamas charter says. What I would note is that Hamas has no power to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And to the extent that Israel is afraid of that, they're creating conditions where, of course, many, many Palestinians more and more would like nothing better than to see the entire state of Israel consumed in a fire. So it's not disingenuous to say Israel, it's a war of all against all. It's not. It's a war by Israel and the United States on a defenseless group of people. That's not the same as Trump and the Republicans versus Biden, Harris, Obama, and the Democrats. Those are two very, very powerful groups of people with enormous stores of wealth and power at their behind them. And we must defeat them both. We are to have any real, legitimate, decent hope for the future. All right, and the proof of that, right, is just what they're doing to Gaza, what they're doing to the Palestinian people, wiping them out, eradicating them from the map. But that's not the only evidence of the ultimate evil, the malice of the Republicratic establishment. That's not the only evidence for sure, not even close to the only evidence. You look at the healthcare system, which we'll talk about today. You're going to look at the fossil fuel industry and its power, its influence, and the destruction it's doing, all of that. But there's your number. I have 30 killed yesterday. So my number I didn't go with yesterday was over 44,800 because there was some conflict, but it appears that number was correct. So AFP, Agence France Presse, saying 30 more yesterday. And there's going to be many, many more today. There's a lot of atrocities that Israel's been carrying out just since midnight in the Middle East. And excuse me as I scratch my eye, just a little bit of an itch there. So, that's where we are, is a horrible, evil world. I mentioned this yesterday, just bring it up again. When we were at the Capitol yesterday, when people were screaming at the Blinken, the mouthpiece for the defense industry, that's also the Secretary of State, people are we don't know what to do. You can yell, but you'll just get arrested. Is that going to make a difference? Probably not. I know there's a lot of talk about how the slaying of Brian Thompson won't make a difference, and certainly the grimy, murderous healthcare industry for profit will grind on and grind in its gears many, many, many people. But I'm not totally convinced that was a meaningless, useless, ultimately harmful response by Luigi, the slayer, the apparent slayer of the healthcare CEO. I'm not convinced that what he did really didn't have value. I think it did. We're really debating this. We're talking about it. You see lots and lots of memes now about healthcare. It wasn't even discussed in the election. And now it's being discussed. It's a day late and a dollar short. It should have been discussed, in the lead up to November 7th. We should have been uniting in support of the candidate who is behind Medicare for all. And that those who have some influence and are getting this message out there are unwilling, incapable, simply not ready still to embrace a party and individuals who back Medicare for all. But at least it's in the conversation. So I give Luigi Mangione some credit for bringing that up. All right, bringing it to our attention, forcing it into the conversation where it otherwise would not have been. That is the innate injustice, the innate cruelty, the criminality of the American healthcare system. So I give Luigi credit for doing that, and I don't have sympathy for his victim. Look, I mean, he's a human being. Someone could look at me and say, he should be killed, right? I mean, I have assets and I'm comfortable and most people aren't. And I would understand that. I mean, that's part of the reason I do this, is because I recognize I'm not really safe. I know that there are people who resent, and it's understandable that they would resent my relatively comfortable, or not even relatively, my comfortable position. I get it. I would resent me too. When I was working in radio, when I was, an executive, whatever you want to call me, manager, owner of the station, I had a problem with a guy that was he was kind of a partner, but he was a junior partner. He was a minor partner in terms of his investment. And he was also going to be an employee. And we had it. There was a major disagreement, a major dispute. It became a lawsuit, which was very upsetting for me. And, in the end, I paid the guy off a little bit to make them go away. But to me, and I think even, I'm trying to be objective about this, they were totally wrong. I was completely right. They were not responsible. They were not doing their job as I believe they should have. And that's what led to this. That's my view. I'm not, obviously other people would have different opinion about that. But the upshot was I was afraid, hey, no one's going to have sympathy for me. This is how I see it, obviously, but no one else is going to be sympathetic to my view. Why should they be? Why should they take my, I just got to go in there and do what I want to do. Why would they have any, think that the owner, the boss is right? They might totally disagree with that. And that's what happens because people are resentful. They look at people with money. They look at people who have a little bit of either good fortune or what have you, however you want to phrase it. And I certainly would say I've had good fortune. And they're like, I don't care about them. I don't want them to have good things because I don't. And you know what? I get that. I totally do. That's why I want a world where everyone has enough and no one has too much. That's why I do this. Because I'll be safer, I'll be more secure, I'll have a better world. It'll be better for me. It's not just that it'll be better for others. Isn't just altruism by any means. I mean, yes, I don't want to live in a world where there's so much agony and pain. Yes, I'm empathetic. It hurts me, emotionally, right? It does. To know what the U.S. government is doing with Israel. It hurts me. But emotionally, it hurts me. But I also recognize that I am at risk. Because there is going to be understandable, justifiable resentment, certainly at the billionaire class. Now, I might say, well, I didn't cause these problems. I'm not the one who's denying health care to people. I'm not the one who's created unaffordable cities and, jobs where people are paid, barely enough to buy food. No, I didn't do that. But the backwash of the anger touches lots of people. There were innocent people who were guillotined. So there were innocent people who were murdered on October 7th. If you want safety, if you want security, if you want justice, Or if you want peace, I should say. If you want peace, that's the expression. If you want peace, you better work for justice because you ain't going to get one without the other. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. So yeah, there's a heck of a lot of resentment out there. And Krugman, in his final column, he's clueless as to what that's all about. He really is. He just doesn't quite understand what's going on. He just doesn't. He's out of it, really. So here he is. My final column, and I'm going to go over, says Krugman, what has changed over these past 25 years. We'll go over that. Does he see did he learn anything? Did he make mistakes? Were there areas where he has some, remorse, contrition? Let's find out. Because that's what I'd like to know. Well, what did you get wrong, Krugman? You had a lot of influence. You're one of the most, seriously, one of the most impactful columnists in the world, right? I don't think there's any doubt. At this point, there's no question the New York Times is the most powerful newspaper, the most powerful media outlet in the world by a very big margin. Not even close. Not even close. And you you were all right there on the op-ed page on the right side. I'm not sure, it was like prominent, right? Every Monday, super prominent. Did you get things wrong? Are there areas, or maybe you say, hey, I was right about this. I nailed this. Let's find out. So his first take, what he first looks at, what Krugman first looks at is what he sees as a significant difference between then and now. There was so much optimism, and now it's anger and resentment. And before we, let's just look at this page. And he's not talking about the anger and resentment of just the working class, who, he says, feel. I put that in, I highlighted it and put a box around it. Feel betrayed. It's not they are betrayed. You see the language, who feel betrayed by elites. Now, Krugman's an elite, and he's being real clear. I didn't betray them. My championing Obama, telling them they should vote for Obama, that wasn't a betrayal. My support for Hillary over Bernie, that wasn't a betrayal. My insistence that you vote for Kamala, no, I didn't betray you. In fact, you weren't betrayed at all. You just feel betrayed by elites. And even there, let's not overstate it. The working class probably isn't even that angry and resentful. The media's making a big deal over it. Sure, maybe there are a few people who wish they had enough money to have a house and health care and enough food. I'm sure there are some people who feel like it's not right, or that they have to work 3 jobs. I'm sure there's some people who aren't really happy, but that's not the big issue to deal with, right? It's just we have to respond to those angry, resentful billionaires who aren't sufficiently admired. Now, I don't disagree that there are angry, resentful billionaires. He's right about that, and that's a huge problem. They feel they should have even more. But he doesn't acknowledge, he pays short shrift to the real, legitimate, understandable resentment and anger of those who, in fact, were betrayed and are being betrayed by elites, including you, Krugman. So right there at the very beginning, he signals where he's going. The problem are those Trump administration billionaires. That's the issue. And it reveals such a complete failure on his end. Trump didn't come to the political forefront really with any influence, I guess, till towards the end of the Obama administration, when he said Obama wasn't born in the United States, right? I want to see the birth certificate, that kind of crap. So that it was an example of the Trump huckster, phony, whatever you want to call him, charlatan, taking advantage of people who were already then starting to become really resentful and angry at Obama, who, let's be honest, was popular. He was elected twice. It's people put their faith in him, their trust. They had confidence in him. And he passes a health care bill that in the end ensconces the for-profit healthcare industry and even, gives it even more power, more influence, more ability to crush dissent. That's what he did. And that was just one of the things he did. He spied on us. He greatly increased the spying over Americans. I mean, that's what he did. So I'm not, I don't know where to go with that. It's just, it is what it is. People were betrayed by Obama. People are angry. People are resentful. It's not that they feel that way, but because of the policies that both the Clinton, W, Obama, Trump, and Biden, Harris all pursued, the rich got richer. They got more powerful. They got more influence. They took away more, with the government's help, more agency by poor people, struggling people, working people, middle-class people, all lost relative to the elites, like Krugman. And so that's why they're feeling so angry. But when that happens, because when you have that major not only just a schism, but a stretching out, where the Gini coefficient, which is the difference between the rich and the poor, how much inequality there is, it becomes incredibly stretched out. So instead of a bell curve with a very, very high center and a relatively wide center, most people fall relatively within the middle of it, and that's where the great amount of wealth is. Instead, where it gets all stretched out. So there's a few people at the top who have just about everything. And you have a very steep mountain, right? So at the right end is almost all the wealth controlled by a tiny little bit of few people, and then a very, very steep slope down. That is also going to be a recipe for resentment and anger among the billionaire class, because they're going to look at other billionaires. They're going to say, well, how come that billionaire is getting a better government contract than I do? How come that billionaire gets to employ a non-union workforce, but I'm stuck with these ungrateful laborers who demand that they get arbitration, and they demand this and they demand that. If I try to cut their wages or send their jobs overseas, I have to face all sorts of trouble. But this startup, this Elon Musk, gets to build a company without even hiring any union labor at all. So of course there's going to be resentment among those various billionaires. Krugman doesn't get that this fundamentally unjust, immoral wealth distribution that we have breeds resentment among every group. And do I have sympathy for those billionaires? No, but I understand why they're resentful. Apparently, Krugman, and this is a friggin' Nobel Prize winner, why doesn't he get it? I'll tell you why. Because he failed himself over the past 25 years to sufficiently champion, to recognize how policies and politicians that he backed were making things worse. We're making a bad situation even worse. From Krugman. It's hard to convey just how good most Americans were feeling in 1999 and early 2000. So I tried to think back into that period of time. And polls showed a level of satisfaction with the direction of the country that looks surreal by today's standards. standards. My sense of what happened in the 2000 election was that many Americans took peace and prosperity for granted, so they voted for the guy who seemed as if he'd be more fun to hang out with. Well, I don't think that's a totally misguided or wrong-headed take. I mean, we did have peace under Clinton. Not complete peace, let's be honest. There was the Yugoslav situation. It was bad. There was ethnic cleansing by Milosevic under Clinton. But by and large, we weren't involved in any hot wars, really. The U.S. wasn't. That was kind of I guess it was a lukewarm war, though. But yeah, we certainly weren't engaged really directly with Russia in any meaningful sense, although there was mission creep in Afghanistan by then. But by and large, yeah, it was better. I agree. I think people were feeling a little bit better, and economically, times weren't as bad as they are now. But the seeds were there, right? Clinton, pushed NAFTA through, completed the process that HW had started. And we were already seeing, Perot had remarked on the giant sucking sound as jobs were being lost. And they were. Bill Clinton incarcerated more black Americans than any other president in history. So there was definitely discontent, understandably so, among many Americans at that point. The amount of, we saw inequality rise very, very significantly when Reagan took office and passed a tax cut with the help of the Democratic Party. And Clinton, to his credit, raised taxes on the rich. But he also never took on corporate elites. He also did push through NAFTA, which was terrible for the working class and unions. He pushed through that omnibus crime bill, which was terrible for black Americans especially, but for poor people who were much more likely to be incarcerated as a result. White, black, brown. You're poor, your chances of going to jail went way, way up under Bill Clinton. Your chance of having your family destroyed because of that went way, way up under Bill Clinton. Welfare reform, in quotes, was very, very harmful to many American families. So the Clinton legacy is very mixed at best. And he was, dishonest and lied to people. You had, I believe, during the Clinton administration, I don't know that I blame Clinton for this exactly, but you had a bill that Bill Frist, the senator from Tennessee, championed that eliminated the requirement that health insurers and healthcare providers be nonprofit. And that created a tremendous incentive to have your healthcare cut, to increase the salaries, to increase the returns on investments in healthcare. So all of this, the seeds are there, right? That under Clinton, you had Clinton sign off on media deregulation, which meant we had, demagogues like Limbaugh and, his followers who all created major instability by lying, by their dishonest bombast, their anti-poor bombast. And it wasn't really sufficiently in any real meaningful way countered by the Clinton administration. So, you want to say, Krugman, things were better 1999, 2000, I'll go along with you. But in part, they were better because the poisonous fruit of the Clinton, H.W. Bush, Reagan administrations hadn't fully ripened. And there are many other areas. The Clintons championed most favored nation status for China, which was devastating, which, was another nail in the coffin of our working class. They supported the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which was a significant factor in the 2008 financial crisis. So the optimism that you're talking about was in part there because we hadn't yet seen just how bad things were going to get as a result of the previous administrations, that current one, but previous ones as well. Does he get that? I mean, that's just the history. Does that resonate with Krugman? Does any of what I just said come from his column, or does he reflect? Because it would be so nice if he talked about it, right? If he said, yes, bad policies led to bad outcomes. Dishonest presidents and parties, this led directly to really bad outcomes. Is that what he acknowledges? Does he recognize that? This guy is like one of the smartest people on the planet, as far as I can tell. Shouldn't he understand this? Not at all. There's zero recognition. There's zero acknowledgement. Yeah, the elites, the political elites created the conditions of pessimism, unhappiness, anger, resentment. None of that from this guy. Instead, it was just a collapse, just sort of out of the blue, a collapse of trust in elites. The public no longer has faith. We can't assume that they're being honest. So what was the reason for that? Well, he does acknowledge the Iraq War was a major factor, but nothing that came before it. It's not like the policies that Clinton or the other presidents before him pursued, or that the Democratic Party, the free market policies. That's not it. It was the invasion of Iraq, which is convenient for him because it was under a Republican president and vice president who were terrible people. I mean, they were among the very, very worst we've ever seen. And he brags, yeah, I received a lot of us who argued that the case for invading Iraq was fundamentally fraudulent. We received pushback from Americans, from people who refused to believe that an American president would do such a thing. Who would say that now? All right. Yes, Bush lied and people died. Cheney lied and people died. All true. Hillary lied. She told you we had to support the W administration. And she never even pulled back until 2014 from that lie. Joe Biden lied. Joe Biden was a champion of war with and on the people of Iraq. War with Iraq and on the people of Iraq. And those are two people that you, Krugman, said should be president. Bernie Sanders didn't buy into any of that. And he's somebody you said shouldn't be president. The New York Times stovetop Judith Miller's BS straight out of the mouth of Dick Cheney to support the lie of WMDs. And you, I guess you recognize that this was a weak case. I'll give you credit for that for sure. But your newspaper made that case. And you don't mention that? That doesn't matter to you? You don't think that's relevant to the resentment and anger of the American people? It's just they feel betrayed? It's not like that was in fact a betrayal, Krugman? You know, he has an opportunity. He had an opportunity when he's going out with a bang, right? His last column. I'm this really important person. To say, hey, look, we screwed up. It's not just there's a sense of betrayal or people feel betrayed or some privileged billionaires are claiming resentment. No, there's real unhappiness throughout the land. And it's for good reason. And I'm part of that. I'm sorry. Here's what we should do differently. But it's not there. Now, for those of you who buy the Times, who read the Times, I read it. Doesn't this anger you? It angers me. Don't you feel like there's something wrong there? this kind of arrogance, it's never our fault. We didn't do anything wrong. This callous disregard for people who have been left, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people being left behind in this country. And the farthest your guy goes is to say they feel betrayed. And it just goes on and on. I mean, I don't know how long I need to go on about this, but I just want to make just one more, because Krugman simply has what he is a democratic hack. So he acknowledges that also, of course, the 2008 financial crisis was is part of the reason for the anger and resentment. And the billionaire class actually making out like bandits, getting richer and richer for it. And is that the fault, at least in part, of President Obama, who had the opportunity to bail out homeowners, individuals, and instead bailed out the big bankers? Who had the opportunity, did President Obama and his, corporatist Justice Department, to prosecute the fraudsters? Right? And he gets it, Krugman. He's like, yeah, it was financial wheeling. It wasn't just financial wheeling dealing. It was fraud. It was lying. It was cooking the books. It was pushing high-risk financial instruments on less savvy homeowners. That's what it was, okay? Right? He doesn't say that. What he says instead is that people, the billionaire class, was wrongly angry at Obama and ginned up this Obama rage for even suggesting Wall Street might have been partly to blame for the disaster. So Krugman completely there elides, he ignores, he sweeps under the rug the responsibility that Obama had for the subsequent looting of the American taxpayer, where the bailout, the billions and billions that we contributed, went to the people themselves who caused the problem. And Krugman doesn't even register with him. It's a complete failure on his part. I'd say progressive failure. He's not a progressive. He is writing to protect his elites. Does he come up with a solution? Well, I give him that too. Yeah, he does. That's one of the things I talk about all the time in the show is I'm not here just to by the way, if you want to try to reach me, go ahead. 240-242-5646. I see, there it is. It wasn't ringing before. It's so weird, this system. I don't get it. It rings only after a few minutes. It does. There's something strange about Google phones, but I use it. I mean, honestly, the reason, let me just give you a little digression here on the way I do my show. I basically do everything I can open source, right? So OBS Studio, it is Windows 11. I would love to go all Linux. And I periodically look into that. How can I use Linux rather than Windows 11? There are a variety of reasons I'd like to use Linux better. I mean, part of it is just political. It's just I don't want to support a for-profit billionaire company, trillionaire company, billionaire owner, right, or founder. So that's part of it. It's less secure. I do think Linux is generally more stable, but I'll be honest, Windows works really well for what I want it to do. Every now and then I have some glitches, but it works really well. But, excuse me there. So, but that said, I prefer to use Linux. I've actually reached out to a guy who does his podcasts in Linux, and through his YouTube, he's a YouTuber like me, and we went through it, how he's able to do it. He's really helpful, really nice guy. In fact, I'd tell you who he is, except I can't remember the guy's name now. Mike, is it Mike? Matt, yeah. If you can find Linux, he's a Linux, honestly, I don't remember exactly, but I haven't looked at his stream for a while, but a really good guy, Matt. Anyway, he said, I use Linux and here's how I do it. And I explained that in my program, I do, and he doesn't. He basically just talks to, he'll show you some clips maybe, but that's it. I said, hey, I have guests. He has maybe someone in studio. I have guests calling in. I have callers, or I want to have callers. I use various multimedia, whether it's, other YouTube clips, whether it's videos that I've recorded myself. And that requires a certain level of sophistication, software sophistication that Linux doesn't support. And, he was like, yeah, I get it. Right? He's like, yeah, I hear you, because what we have in Linux that they don't have what we don't have in Linux, what is in Windows 11 is the ability to use what are called virtual cables. And virtual cables are great because I can route audio from any source, anywhere. So I can route from myself to my caller. I can route from my caller to my guest. I can route from my video to my guest and my callers. You can't do that. At least it's much, much more difficult. It's much more challenging. And there's no persistence to it, if you understand that, in Linux. So I have no choice. So there you go. All right, I don't know why I went to that, but it's something that's been on my mind. Krugman, back to Krugman. Is there a way out of the grim place we're in? The grim place we're in, by the way, is not people don't have health care. We're involved in endless wars. We're committing genocide. We're committing ecocide. That's not the grim place we're in. At least if it is, that's not what Krugman identifies as the grim place. It's just where there's a lot of resentment and anger. So he says, while resentment can put bad people in power, and none of those bad people are the people he supported. They're not Barack Obama. They're not Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. No, not Bill Clinton. It can't keep them there. At some point, the public will realize that most politicians railing against elites actually are elites. By the way, interesting, he doesn't mention Bernie Sanders, because Bernie always rails against elites, and he's the least elite of any politician. And at that point, the public may be willing to listen to people who don't try to argue from authority, which is so rich for him to say. He's saying, we shouldn't listen to people who just argue from authority, who don't try to argue from authority. Whereas that's the only thing Krugman does. He's this Nobel Prize winner. He's on the page of the New York Times. That's a prize winner in economics. That's his credential. It's totally arguing from authority, not, hey, I'm, demonstrated over time that I'm working for the people, that I want to make life better for you. It's pure or authoritative standpoint. And don't make false promises, but try to tell the truth as best they can. How do we know who those people are, by the way? How do we know who's trying to tell the truth as best they can? I would just say one other point. Krugman, where you really fell down on this, where you really blew it. Why can't you acknowledge you should be listening to the people? Remember, he told us, the economy's doing really well. I don't know why people are upset that they can't pay their rent. Rent raise went up a little bit, but now they're stabilizing at a higher level. I don't know why people are angry or upset about the economy. Maybe you should have been listening. Maybe you need to listen to the public. Maybe that's what we need, are politicians who listen to the people rather than expecting, as you seem to, the people will listen to them. But none of that from Krugman. And that's exactly where we are right now. Exactly where we are. Final, I'm going to just go a little, because I really wanted to go into this, because this is a guy who's had, I think in a lot of ways, far more influence than any of us YouTubers. I know people like Joe Rogan have huge audiences, and I do not mean to in any way diminish that. They're very influential. And that's somebody that Krugman should be listening to, by the way. But all that said, Krugman's audience obviously is tiny in many ways compared to someone like a Rogan. But, he probably has 1 million readers. That's a lot of people reading your column. That's a lot of folks every week. And those are pretty important, influential people. They're movers and shakers and business people, other journalists. He has a big audience, a big megaphone, and a lot of power. And we should recognize where that power, that influence has let us down. So he says here, we may never recover the kind of faith in our leaders that we used to have. Again, failing to acknowledge that the leaders that he championed are a big reason that we've lost faith if we had it. And I never really did in them. But if we stand up to the caucustocracy, so I've used that term, ruled by the worst, that's emerging. I love that. That's why I put it in, I highlighted it with the blue square, or rectangle rather, as we speak. We may eventually find our way to a better world. So that caucustocracy, it's emerging, according to Krugman. It's not already here. It hasn't already been here for decades. It's emerging now. It's just Trump. That's the caucustocracy. It isn't the president after president after president who green-lighted ever more oil and gas projects on our federal lands. It isn't the president after president who sent drones to kill many times innocent civilians, or kept Americans in danger zones for numerous tours of duty in regions where we weren't wanted and were creating more instability. It's not the leaders who went into Haiti and stopped a minimum wage hike to 61 cents an hour, which hurt not only the Haitian garment workers, but our own American workers. They're not part of that caucustocracy. No, it's emerging now. It's a complete failure. What you see is a complete failure by Paul Krugman to take ownership, to take responsibility for what he did, for how he created these conditions. All right, 240-242-5646. That kind of does it for my conversation about Krugman. I got a lot more to get to today. I think I mentioned Lena Khan and some other topics as well, but I'm going to try to run through them, and probably with Khan, I'm going to postpone that till tomorrow because it's been an hour. I spent a lot of time, almost an hour, not quite, but I wanted to just highlight this. And again, Krugman, says we have to listen to leaders who don't talk so loud and don't argue from authority. I don't know who those people are. Here's my response to that, actually. Before we get to that, let me just give you my quick, I want to put that up there on the screen for you. Here's my response for that. We need to embrace leaders whose policies will make life better, who will focus on poor, struggling, and working class Americans, who will promote peace. That's what we need to do. Not whatever, I don't even know what that's how you want to stand up to the caucustocracy. That's what that is. The caucustocracy, I think maybe plutocracy is a little more accurate in general, because and he wouldn't say that, because for Krugman, the caucustocracy is Trump and his minions. But really, it's a plutocracy. It's a rule by the billionaire class. And you're seeing two different faces of it. Trump's a little more unpredictable, but in some ways, that unpredictability can even be worse than the predictable corporate soullessness of the Democrats. So you want to stand up to it? You want to stand up to the plutocracy? Support true progressive leaders, politicians, policies. And that means no more Republicrats. All right. Wanted to get to this. So one of the friends of Halitics is Charlie Cooper. He has been on the program before, and I've reached out to him. I hope I can get him on. I don't know if I'll be able to. I think he and I have he was more, he supported. I'm not condemning him for this. This is not a criticism whatsoever. Charlie supported, I believe, Kamala. He is a guy who does, I won't say it's not an any blue will do, not at all. But, and I don't want to, again, if you disagree, Charlie, if I'm getting this wrong, please, if you're listening, watching, let me know. 240-242-5646. A lot of people watching, so maybe you're one of them. But you did support, I believe, Harris. And you do believe that the Democrats aren't as bad as the Republicans. And so here you have, I got this email, which depressed me. So he started this group, or he was one of the founders of this organization called Get Money Out Maryland, which I totally support. I love it. Yes, our Democratic-controlled government, it's a trifecta. Everything in Maryland is Democratic. And yet money rules the roost. Money makes the decisions. But we don't have healthy Maryland because of that. The Democratic-controlled legislature continues to push casino gambling apps, right? So everyone can lose their entire family's nest egg at home. That's the basic premise of that. And Charlie's like, you know what? Our strategy did not work. What now? In other words, they just haven't been able to persuade the Republicans to back any bans in money. And we're seeing, of course, the fruits of that right now. So what do we do? And he says we're going to disband. We're not going to continue as an organization. So this is from his email. And again, by the way, if you haven't yet subscribed, I see a lot of people. 14 of you are watching. So if you're all watching me, this is what I say to you. 15. Click like and click subscribe. Come on, let's get those numbers up. My subscription number isn't going up even with all you people watching. So boost that subscription number, please. And I don't see more likes either. I'll like it myself. There's my like. I recommend that we should join. So he says, let me show the bold at the bottom. Get Money Out Maryland will not continue as an organization. I think it's very disappointing, but I understand it. And then he writes, I recommend that we should join already existing efforts. I, by the way, emailed him. I would like to see, well, I'll give you my answer, but I suggested a possible course for this group. I recommend we should join already existing efforts to create a grassroots progressive movement against wealth and income inequality with sufficient power to influence major political parties. I like that, but I don't love it. So I like it because he's not saying it should be part of the current Republican establishment. It shouldn't be part of that, but it should influence it. The reason I have a problem with that is because, now I like it because I don't want it to be part of the Republican establishment. The reason I have a problem with it is it assumes there would be ability to influence the major political parties. I don't believe that. I don't see that at this point. I see the need to, again, separate from those parties to build up an alternative, an emerging party. And I go with the Greens because they're there and they have some really good ideas and they're not corrupt. I don't agree with everything. They're too identity focused. And to his credit, look, Charlie even writes, what we need, union expansion, taxing the rich, breaking monopoly power, absolutely. But how do we attract people? Support racial, ethnic, and gender equality, and conversion of our economy to sustainability and peaceful pursuits. But economic equality should be in the forefront. So I agree with that as far as it goes. But I would say peace and sustainability should also be should take precedence over that the identity-based aspect. Because the second you single out one identity group over another, or as a victimized or marginalized group, you lose people. You just lose them. Now, you can lose people no matter what, right? You support peace, you're going to lose some military supporters, right? Even if they're working class, they may support the military. So you're going to lose some if you promote peace. You're going to lose some if you promote the environment, ecology and sustainability. But the difference is that when you support specific identity-based relief. You're pitting members of what should be the same coalition directly against each other for a slice of the pie. And that's where I have a problem with it. We need to cut a giant chunk of that pie. 85, 90% of that pie needs to be taken from, or 80 to 95% of the pie that is currently being consumed by 1% needs to be taken away from them and then shared among the others, with those who have the least getting sufficient pie to make sure they have enough. That's to my way of thinking how you can win, how we can win. But that's what we have to champion. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Yeah, I've been on for, well, just over an hour. I want to, I had mentioned this. So you see that United Healthcare. Let me just get myself back. I'll put that up in a little different way. I mentioned, to start out, this will be my last little vignette before I move on to other pursuits today. In other words, stop the show is what I'm saying, and then I'll come back tomorrow and for the free-for-all. I hope you call me because I see a lot of you online watching. I'd love to talk to you tomorrow if you don't call today. I mentioned that Luigi Mangione had really, brought to the table, to the discussion, healthcare in a way that hasn't been part of the conversation as a result of him killing the, Thompson there, the evil, soulless CEO. And an example of that. So this is from Marianne Williamson. I probably shouldn't put my little response to her, but she puts this guy on her, she X's him out, singing a song about how there's no humanity in United Health. So obviously this song is being promoted by somebody who's pretty well known, right? Marianne Williamson, people know who she is. She ran for president a few times. And, I don't have much, love for her or any really. And I think of her as kind of a phony, a charlatan. But, in policy, she's more progressive than most Democrats. And if she had been the nominee, I probably would have voted for her. I'd have to hear her policies. I don't, again, think much of her. But here she is promoting, and she has been good on Medicare for All. So here she's promoting Medicare for All, this United Health song. It's getting attention. It's getting attention because Luigi Mangione killed a healthcare CEO. And my response to Marianne is, well, now are you going to embrace the Green Party? Because as we learn, as Brianna Joy Gray pointed out in a tweet I showed you yesterday, she was the Green Party. That was the champions of Medicare for All. I just love how all these so-called progressives, Democrats, David Stroud is another one. I'll show that video tomorrow. I was going to show it today. Going on and on about how bad our healthcare system is right now after Trump's already been elected and after they champion somebody who isn't for Medicare for All. So what kind of credibility do these people have? What kind of credibility does our revolution have when they send out an email about how we understand why people are so angry that they support the guy who killed Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione? We understand the anger, the resentment, which, according to Krugman, only stems from the feeling of being betrayed, not the reality of betrayal. But what kind of credibility do any of them have when they were all there for Kamala, when they all had Kamala's back? Somebody who's not for Medicare for All. Somebody who's not for peace. It's time, folks, to move in a very different direction. All right, that'll do it for me. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll be back tomorrow. This will be the free-for-all, and I'll get to the other stories I wasn't able to talk about.